Welcome everyone. Today we'll talk about fund management and what happens during disaster. How do we allocate resources? If possible, how do we mobilize resources as far as cash is concerned or fund is concerned? Yes, the agenda is simple and straightforward. Government's goal in managing disaster risk. That is what we should be looking into it. Investment in DRR, disaster and risk response. Disaster risk response, what we are looking into it. How do we mitigate it? How do we help the community and save lives if possible the properties thereby. So this can be done in under two public investment forum. One is the framework and the mechanism, one being very transparent, one being very clear about how funds have been collected and how funds have been utilized. So framework and mechanism is very much should be there. It's a preemptive requirement. Investment needs, challenges, and conclusion as on when on basis. So agenda simple and straightforward. The government goals in managing disaster risk reforms. What we are looking into it, the investment for it. What are the framework? What are the mechanism? How you collect the funds and how do you spend it? Transparency has to be maintained. The investment requirement is there, and the challenges and conclusion thereby. So vision for disaster management is the reduction of vulnerability. Vulnerability of whom? The community where the disaster has struck. Vulnerability means the way you want to react. If you can react it, recover it faster, you are less vulnerable. If you react and recover very slowly, you are most likely very vulnerable. So sustain a risk reduction culture at every level, first and foremost at the community and individual level through proper education, then probably infrastructure, then probably having the mechanism in places as far as fire department, police department, the health department in consideration, strengthen the capacity of disaster management system as the case might be, and improve the responses and recovery part as on when on basis. How do we come across with it? So investment in DRR, disaster and risk response, how do we go it? There are only two ways. One is the private way and the other one is public way. What is the public way? Is where the government intervention can be done. What is the private way? Where however small NGOs or individuals or community can work on their own, probably without any external aid, is the investment that we look into it. So if a community can decide to have its own fund for certain unforeseen emergencies, probably that's it. If the government can allocate certain fund for unseen emergencies, is the public fund that goes around it. So public investment framework, what is it? We are looking for a vision or a perspective plan. We can have a 5 year plan. We can have a national disaster management plan for every 5 years, 8 years, 4 years, the way you want to go around it. The ADP includes local development initiatives and plans. ADP is the American Development Plan or the development plan of the United Nations. It includes local development. It includes utilizations of local communities because that is where everybody went around it. Enabling environment for private sector's investment as on when on basis. So that's the public investment framework, the vision, the perspective framework, the 5 year plans, might be 3 years, might be 4 years, might be 8 years, depending upon the nations that you're working around it. The National Disaster Management Plan, the American Development Plan includes local development, the community level development, local initiative, enabling environment for private sector's investment as on when on basis. So let us talk about the public investment mechanism. First is the infrastructure. Can we have a shelter, road, embankment, killer, excavation, canal, pond, tree plantation, other engineering intervention? What we are looking in terms of flood, in terms of tsunamis, in terms of tornadoes, hurricanes, can we have a community relief center? Is it only there possible in a church or in a religious center perhaps? But probably a community relief center can solve the process altogether. Services, what are we looking into it? The health, education, information, communication, training, these are all part of the services. This is all part of the awareness campaign that the community can go for it. Social protection is cash based and food based. Either you can help in cash or you can help in kind. What are we looking into it? Cash, kind, or both of them. So humanitarian assistance is the response and recovery as on when on basis. That is what public investment mechanism is all about. It. Remember, we are talking about government interventions. Remember, the government has the power to build up shelters, have embankment, have canal, pond, tree plantation, have a long-term plan for the development or protection of the ecology or the environment thereby. So we are talking about the services, health, education. The government can have it in a long-term visions of its own. Now we come into the private investment, and these are domestic investment. Remember, disaster losses is up to 1.8%, let's say roughly 2% of the GDP. That happens. So 6.5% of the annual budget spent on a disaster risk response team purposes per annum, which is equivalent to approximately only 1%, around 77% of the domestic or the private investment that goes around it. Remember, only 1% of GDP is spent for social protection, which is specifically for disaster, of which 80% are on domestic basis, private funded, and relief constitutions is almost 100% domestic that goes around. At the end of the day, is the community affected, and the community only can help each other out all together. That needs to be understood. Definitely, we have public investment, the government intervention, and the domestic investment. Disaster loss cross the approximately 2% of the GDP. So keep that in mind before you proceed anything. So what are we looking at public investment need? We're looking at emergency hazards and risk planning, slow onset, salinity, and urban disasters as the case might be. Protecting development gains thereby, research and development, post disaster reconstruction and resilient recovery is what we all look forward to. So yes, emerging hazards and risk, what are they? Maybe slow onset, maybe salinity, maybe urban disaster, maybe there is deforestation. Protecting development gains, probably yes, what we are looking into it. Research and development, post disaster reconstruction and recovery, how fast can we do it and how sustainable we can do it is most important. We come into the last fag end of the presentation is all about the conclusions, all about the challenges. Remember, the competitive pricing priorities are social protection, should be better utilized in disaster risk response. Now, this is what we are looking into it. Short term and long term perspective was increasing the cost for relief. The recovery, cut short development expenditure. That is what we are looking at. The cost for relief and recovery, increase the cost and cut short the development expenditure, increasing demand in investment and risk reduction. The demand versus supply increasingly needs to be in balance. Now, this is what we need to fix it out. Absolutely. Investment versus expenditure. There has to be sheer balances. Increase the share of government funding in disaster investment. This has to be reverted. With this, I come to an end of this presentation. I hope everybody understands how fund management is to be done during disaster. Thank you for watching this video till the end.